which I will cover in this talk. I also want to thank our engineering group and supporting staff who are essential in collecting all those wonderful data which made the studies possible. Okay, so here's a short outline of this talk. So I think most of you have heard many times about the importance of the meridional turning separation. So I will just say a few words about what motivated us to come up with this methodology to derive near real-time MOC and heat transport. Then I will give you a short description of the methodology we used. In the results part, I'll talk about the seasonal and internal variations in meridional heat transport, as well as contributions from different processes such as geostrophic transport, Eichmann transport, and also the overturning and gyre components, with some more focus on the North Atlantic at 26.5 north, but also covers South Atlantic from 20 south to 34.5 south. So at the end, I will just give you a few bullet summary what we have learned so far. So as you know that the MOC carries a huge amount of water, heat, carbon, and other properties around the globe. In the Atlantic Ocean, the AMOC accounts for 2/3 of the oceanic northward heat transport. Because of its large transport, many studies have found that the MOC can impact global and regional weather and climate, sea level and extreme weather events, as well as ecosystems and fisheries. Therefore, it is important to monitor the changes in the MOC and to understand its dynamics. In the past 2 decades, scientific community has put tremendous effort to monitor the MOC changes. However, as you can see from the plot in the bottom right, the observation record in most locations are still too short, even to get a robust seasonal variation. So many groups has came up with different methods to derive MOC and or heat transport by combining in situ and satellite observations. So today I'm going to introduce to you the method we have been using in the past 6 or 7 years to derive near real-time MOC and heat transport in South Atlantic Ocean. And recently we extended this methodology to the North Atlantic at 26.5 north. So the foundation of our methodology is the high correlation between sea surface height anomaly and the depths of isotherms. So here on the right, I show you 2 examples of the correlation between SSH and 15 degrees C isotherm depths on the left, and with the 5 degrees C isotherm depths on the right. So you can see their correlation is pretty high, particularly in the subtropical regions in both North and South Atlantic. So this high correlation allows us to derive a linear relationship between depths of isotherms and the sea height anomaly for every 1 degree of temperature between 3 degrees C to 28 degrees C. For example, at this point, we're using the sea level anomaly from altimeter at 30 north and 40 west in March 2003. And based on those linear relationships, we can derive the isothermal depths as shown here. I should mention that at the surface, the sea surface temperature, we use the satellite observed SST from OI SST. And so then we can, using the isotherm depths to interpolate interpolate to get the temperature profile. So just for comparison, here I'm showing you the observation at the same time and location from SBT in the top 800 meters and padded with World Ocean Atlas climatology in March. So you can see the altimeter-derived temperature profile captures the structure pretty well. So using those temperature from altimeter and the historical TS relationship, we can derive salinity profile. And then using the seahead anomaly from altimeter since '93, we can derive temperature and salinity profile at different latitudes. This will allow us to compute the transport and NOC and heat transport. So for evaluation of a methodology, AOML has been maintaining two SBT transects in both North and South Atlantic. One in North Atlantic, namely AX7 at about 30 north, started in '95. Up to now, we have about 110 sections. The other section is in South Atlantic at approximately 34.5 south, started in 2002. We have total of 55 transects in South Atlantic. So the SBTs measures the up-ocean temperature from sea surface down to about 850 meters. Here is an example of one section in March 2003 along X7. So to compute the NOC and heat transport, we need the top to bottom temperature salinity section. So to derive salinity for each SBT profile, as I mentioned, we use the TS historical relationship to get the salinity corresponding to the SBT observations. And then we padded World Ocean TS climatology below the SBT depths to derive the trans-basin full depth TS section. Therefore, we can use it to compute the transport. So so for comparison here on the top right, I'm showing you the temperature section in March 2003 along AX7. We constructed the temperature profile at exactly the same time and location as SBT observation. So you can see that the altimeter-derived temperature section compared pretty well with the SBT measurements, though it's somewhat smoother. So without further explaining the methodology, in the bottom panels here, I'm showing you the MOC and heat transport derived from these two SBT transects and also the synthetic transect derived from altimeter and in-situ observations. The left two panels here is for AX18 in the South Atlantic. The top is for NOC. Lower panel is for heat transport. The red two panels is for AX7. So you can see in both North and South Atlantic, the NOC and heat transport from SBT and or altimeter derived shows a really high correlation. So this really suggests that, at least compared to the SBTs, this methodology works pretty well. So, so therefore, we kind of apply this methodology to 5 different latitudes. So one in the North Atlantic at 26.5 north, and 4 latitudes in the South Atlantic from 20 south to 34.5 south. So there are some differences in the details of the methods we applied for North Atlantic and South Atlantic, which are listed here. Because the ocean is relatively warmer in the North Atlantic, the 3 degrees C isotherm, which is the coldest we derive from altimeter sea level anomaly, is well below the 1,500 meter depths. So we use the TS from altimeter from sea surface down to 1,500 meter depths, and then padded TS climatology from World Ocean Atlas below to complete the profiles. Similar to the rapid array calculation, for the Florida Strait, we constrain the volume transport to the monthly averaged Florida current transport measured from cable. We done this by adding a constant velocity adjustment throughout the Florida Strait. Also, following the Meridian array calculation, we put the reference level at 1,200 meter depths. This is corresponding to the interface between northward flowing Antarctic intermediate water and southward flowing upper North Atlantic deep water. So in the South Atlantic, because the water is relatively colder and the 3 degrees C isotherm is normally above 1,500 meter depths, so we use the altimeter-derived TS from surface down to 1,000 meter depths and then padded World Ocean Atlas TS climatology below to construct the full depth TS section. For the reference velocity, we use the velocity at 1,000 meter depths derived from Argo drifting velocity as a reference. This is constant in time. We don't have enough data to derive time varying reference velocity at 1,000 meters. So for the Eichmann transport, we use the ERA5 monthly wind stress for volume transport. And when we compute the heat transport, we use sea surface temperature for the Eichmann transport. So without going into too much of the methodology, here is the nearly 29-year time series of MOC in blue and the Meridian heat transport in red for all 5 latitudes from 26.5 north on top and moving southward at 20 south down to 34.5 south at the bottom. So the first thing you notice that the MOC and heat transport has really high correlation at all latitudes, about 0.9, and at 25 is particularly high. It's nearly 9.97. This high correlation can also be seen when you look at the on the right, the scatter plot of the anomalies of heat transport in the y-axis versus anomalies in volume transport MOC at the x-axis for each latitude. You can see this linear relationship. And also I plotted here the relationship between geostrophic transport and Eichmann transport. So normally you can see that the Eichmann transport has a much stronger response. The heat transport has much stronger response to the volume transport because the Eichmann transport is at the top of the water column where the temperature is higher. See, and here in the middle, I'm showing you the listed all the mean and standard deviation. So you can see the highest variability we see is at 34.5 south. This is consistent with what we learned from the Meridian arrays. We found from the Samba array at 34.5 south has higher variability than the rapid array at 26.5 north. And then the variability from 20 to 30 is kind of similar, around 2 sort of. So here's the mean stream function shown on the left. So at 26.5 north, the maximum of stream function we found it at about 1,000 meter depths. Similar to the rapid array, we found the two depth mode of overturning, as shown in the lower right plot here. This is all the stream function during the 29 years at 26.5 north. And the green dot shows the depths where it overturns. So one is shallow overturning at 750 meters. This is corresponding to the depths of Flores Strait, and the deep overturning at near 1100 meter depths. And these two overturning modes have been contributed to the presence of Antarctic intermediate water. When this northward AIW, flowing AIW appears at this latitude, then we will have this deeper overturning. When it doesn't present at this latitude, we will have this shorter overturning mode. So over the 29-year period, we found that this about 20% of the time we have this shallow overturning mode. So in the South Atlantic, the overturning depths at 20 and 25 south is comparable to 26.5 north, around 1,000 meter depths, but it's slightly deeper when we move south at 30 south and 34.5 south is around 1,200 meter depths. So before I move on to talk about seasonal internal variations, I just want to give you a general idea of the long-term trend in meridional heat transport and the where we are in terms of year 2021 based on the 7 months of data from January to July. So the plot here shows you yearly anomalies, which is computed after removing the monthly climatology. So the seasonal cycle doesn't impact the anomaly for the 2021 case. What you see here that we see a decreasing trend at 26.5 north, but it's not significant. Whereas in South Atlantic anomaly, we see an increasing trend, except at 30 south. And the trend only significant at 25 south and 34.5 south, with trend about 0.004 petawatts per year. So this really suggesting there is ocean heat convergence between 34.5 south and 26.5 north. So in terms of 2021, we see that at 26.5 north, we have a negative anomaly about minus 0.1 petawatts, whereas in South Atlantic, we see a positive anomaly varies from 0.1 at 30 south to 0.13 petawatts at 31.5 south. So now I'm going to move on to talk in some detail about the heat transport at 26.5 north. First, I want to show you the vertical and horizontal distribution of heat transport on long-term mean. So just quickly, we separated the total heat transport into overturning and gyre component. The overturning component corresponds to the zonally averaged velocity and temperature, whereas the gyre component corresponding to the deviation of temperature and velocity from the zonal mean. So the right panel here shows the cumulative heat transport. The blue from sea surface down to ocean bottom. The blue is for the total heat transport, and the magenta is for the overturning component, and this is for the gyre component. So what you can see that for both the overturning and total heat transport, it reaches maximum around 1,000 meter depths, and then decrease slowly toward the ocean bottom. But for the gyre component, is mainly constrained to the top 700 meters. This is corresponding kind of to the Florida Strait depths. So the gyre component increases to about 0.2 petawatts from surface down to 300 meter depths, and then decreases to about 0.1 petawatts at 700 meter depths. So the middle panel here is the cumulative meridian heat transport from west to east to show you the zonal distribution of heat transport. So you can see here at the beginning, this is the Florida street transport. This northward heat transport is mainly coming from Florida Street, about 2.4 to 2.5 petwas. And there are also some northward transport near the western boundary, west of 74 west. This is due to the northward volume transport. And in the interior region east of 75 west, the transport is basically southward. You see this decrease in the northward transport. So the right panel here shows you the cumulative transport of the gyre component from west to east. So the first thing you notice at the western boundary, this is the Florida Street transport for gyre component is very small. So about 0.03. And also we have this positive gyre component west of 75 west. This is due to both the deviations of velocity and temperature from zonal mean are positive. However, east of 74 west and west of 42 west in this region, the gyre component is negative. This is because the deviations of the temperature from zonal mean is positive, but then the velocity deviation is negative. This gives you the negative gyre heat transport. Whereas east of 42 west, because both temperature and velocity deviations from zonal mean are negative, this gives a positive gyre component. So let me move on to the signal variations. Here I'm showing you the signal variation from 3 estimates. The blue is our estimate from altimeter-based method, and then the green is from rapid. So I'm also showing here is the energy budget from Chambers et al. So what you see that the our altimeter-based method gives peak-to-peak amplitude of heat transport signal is about 0.35. It's somewhat weaker than the rapid estimates, about 0.48. But considering their variability, the difference is not statistically significant. However, we do see there are a large difference in phase of these two in terms of seasonal evolution of transport. So you can see our altimeter estimated transport normally positive between April to August, and then negative from September to December. This is kind of opposite what you see from rapid estimates, which is positive in the first half of the year, negative first half of the year, and then positive in the second half of the year. And our the phase from our estimate is more consistent with this energy budget, as you can see here. So we separated the transport into different components to say, what causes this phase difference. Because our estimate and the rapid estimate use the same winds, the ERA5, so the Eichmann component is very similar, as well as the Florida current transport, because we are constrained to the Florida current transport from cable measurements for volume transport. So the difference is really coming from the interior geostrophic transport. So to dig into a little bit into this, why you have this large difference, we take a look at the dynamic height on east and western side, because the rapid calculation is really based on the dynamic height on both sides of the interior region. So on the top panel here, I'm showing you the interior geostrophic transport in the solid line. The red is from rapid, and the blue is from our estimate. So the dashed line here, I'm showing you the dynamic height difference near surface. The red is from rapid based on the TS profile from eastern and western boundary, and the blue is from satellite SSH measurements. So what you can see there is a really high correlation between the interior geostrophic transport and dynamic height difference. So, so to look into the difference here, I show you in the middle is the dynamic height at both boundaries, and as well as their difference shown on top. So the blue line is the difference between east and west, and the red curve is for the dynamic height at the western side, and the green is for the eastern side. So you can see that the seasonal variation is really dominated by the eastern side from rapid away. However, when you look at the SSH from altimeter, we see on both sides shows really strong seasonal cycle for the SSH. And this is really different from the dynamic height from rapid. You don't see much variability before August or September. So, just to think about, why this really has such a big difference. So I take a look at how the rapid, this east-west TS profile are constructed. Here is on the top, here is the mooring in the western side, and the on the right panel here shows you how the temperature and salinity constructed using different moorings at different time period. And the lower panel shows you the moorings at the eastern side and how the TS at the eastern boundary are constructed from different moorings. So what you notice here is that there's no observation near the surface, particularly for the eastern side on the top 100 meters, where most season there's strong seasonal variation focusing this top 100-meter layer. So I think that difference may be due to this, even though I think I should mention that the dynamic height I'm showing here from rapid is corresponding to 100-meter depth, not at surface, because I don't know how the rapid is the extrapolated the TS. I know in McCarthy et al. They talk about they develop a methodology to extrapolate the TS to the surface. Since I don't know the details, so I just took the depths where I have enough data, at least for 5 years, I can construct the season cycle. So, so this may be something to look into for the difference. Here, for our estimates, here I'm separated the heat transport into geostrophic and Eichmann components on the top panel here. So you can see that both geostrophic and Eichmann contribute to the heat transport seasonal variation, but you can see they tend to be out of phase. And the geostrophic kind of has more control. You can see the phase of total Meridian heat transport follows the geostrophic. So the seasonal variation in the geostrophic transport accounts for the total geostrophic variability, so more than 40%, whereas for the Eichmann and total heat transport, the seasonal variation only accounts for about 20% variance. The lower panel here, I separated the transport into overturning and gyre component. You can see that this seasonal variation is controlled by the overturning component. So for the gyre component, is about 0.1 the magnitude, and different from what we see from the mean. This gyre component mostly comes from the Fleur street. As I mentioned before, Fleur street has a very minimal contribution to the time mean gyre, but it does, controls the seasonal variation. So here's the internal variation. Again, I'm comparing these three different estimates. Different from season cycle, we see a pretty good agreement among the three estimates. The correlation between our estimates and rapid during 2004 to 2016 is about 0.8. And then with the energy budget is about 0.65. All three estimates during their common period from 2004 to 2016 all show a decreasing trend. However, only the rapid array, this trend are statistically significant. So this probably, this strong trend in rapid contributed by this high heat transport at the beginning of their time series, which we did not see from our estimate and energy budget. So if you look at how they constructed the east and west TS profiles, you see that actually during this peak time of heat transport, there are some problems with the Meridian array, their battery failure. I think they use climatology at this time period. So this is also something we need to look into in the future. So here, similar to the seasonal variation, so I look at the interior volume transport, geostrophic transport with the dynamic height difference between the two boundaries. On the top is for the rapid array, in the middle is for our altimeter methodology. So you can see for both cases, the interior volume transport show really high correlation with the dynamic height difference for those cases. However, in the bottom here, I plotted again for the dynamic height difference, light blue for the altimeter sea surface height difference between the two boundaries, and then the orange for rapid. You can see they don't have very high correlation. The correlation is kind of low. So I also show here the dynamic height difference I derived from Argo gridded product, which I interpolated into the Meridian location. Interestingly, we see this high correlation between the dynamic height derived from Argo products with the altimeter data. The correlation is around 0.8, but the correlation with the rapid dynamic height difference is kind of low. So just some details about the internal variation of meridian heat transport and their contributions from different processes. On top panel here, I separated the meridian heat transport into geostrophic component and Eichmann transport. So the total shown as blue, geostrophic at right, and Eichmann as green. So what you can see, the variability kind of similar in geostrophic and Eichmann, both contribute to the night meridian heat transport. However, over the 29-year period, the geostrophic shows a higher correlation. And also important that the geostrophic and Eichmann dominate during different time periods. For example, from 98 to 2004, the geostrophic transported large control, whereas from 2009 to 2013, the Eichmann has a large control. So this large control during this early period is largely contributed to the large variations in the Florida current transport, as shown in the middle panel here. So I separated the geostrophic transport into Florida current transport, shown at the light blue, and the interior geostrophic transport at the grid line, and the red is the total geostrophic. So you can see that in the first 10 years, the geostrophic transport is dominated by the large variation in the Flux current heat transport. Whereas since 2004, that the Flux current transport has very weak variability. So the total transport is more dominated by the interior transport. So these top two panels really show you that during different time periods, the heat transport can be controlled by different processes. This really suggests that we need continuously monitor the MOC to understand better its variability. So the lower panel here is the separation of total meridian heat transport into overturning and gyre components. Similar to the seasonal variation, we see that the overturning component dominate the total heat transport. So I also looked at the relationship of meridian heat transport at 26.5 north with NAO. Here I took two different NAO index. One from station-based sea pressure difference, and the other one is based on the dominant UF mode. So for the geostrophic transport, you see a negative correlation at zero lag. The geostrophic heat transport with NAO from both index. And then for the Eichmann transport in the middle here, you show there's a strong positive correlation, particularly with this station-based NAO index. The correlation is around 0.8. When you look at the total, because of this compensation between geostrophic and Eichmann, the correlation at zero lag between NAO and the total heat transport is somewhat lower. And when I use the dominant mode, UF mode based NAO index, the correlation is not significant. However, because of the large positive correlation with the station-based NAO for Eichmann transport, we see a significant correlation, positive correlation at zero lag. Interestingly, for both index, we see a significant negative correlation when the NAO leads by about a year. So this perhaps there's a couple of reasons. So you see that the Eichmann and geostrophic both shows this a deepening of lower the negative correlation. So for the Eichmann, this perhaps links to the re-emergency mechanism when we have a strong NAO in the year before, and the cold water stored below the mixed layer and come up in the next year when the mixed layer deepens, and therefore gives you a lower Eichmann transport. And the geostrophic transport, in the past, there has been studies showing that the NAO and Flux current transport has a negative correlation with about a year or two leading time. So this is something, again, look into it. So now let me move on to South Atlantic. So here first I'm showing you the comparison of MOC at 34.5 south between our estimate and the from the Samba mooring array. On the top panel here shows you the mooring array. I'm not going into detail. And the lower panel shows you the three estimates. The blue shows you the estimates from our method. And the red is based on the mooring array, just using two moorings, one from western side, one from eastern side. And the green shows you the recent estimate by Meridian using all 9 moorings. So, different from 26.5 north, where although that the rapid array shows large variability, when we compare altimeter-based estimates, but it's not that large. For 26.5 north, altimeter-based variability about 2.9, and the rapid array is about 3.5. However, you see that in South Atlantic, the mooring-based estimates really have this very strong variability, particularly with this 9 pi CPAS-based estimates, which we still need to look into why. So the because the PIs, the mooring estimates, we only have less than 2 years, 4 years of estimates is kind of to do the correlation. It's too short, but their correlation is about 0.5, 0.6. So we still need a longer time series to compare these two different estimates from altimeter-based and mooring. So just quickly for the seasonal variation of meridian heat transport in South Atlantic for this 4 latitude, shown in the left panels, the blue is for total heat transport and the right is for geostrophic components, green for Eggman. So you can see that as you move in southward, the seasonal cycle decreases or increases. This is also true for both geostrophic and Eggman component. So what I'm also showing here is the seasonal cycle derived from the energy budget by Chambers et al. You see their seasonal cycle, the phase is consistent with what we derive. However, they have this really strong amplitude and it doesn't change with latitude. The right panel here shows you the separation of heat transport into Overturning and gyre. You can see that the Overturning is totally dominant. From 20 to 30 south. And the amplitude for gyre component here at 34.5 south is comparable with what we derive for 26.5 is about 0.1 petawatts. So for internal variation, so what we see so one point, similar to what we found at 26.5 north, we see that geostrophic and Eggman components, shown as red and green, they dominate at different time period and at different latitude. For example, at 26 north, 26 south, we see that the Eggman component has a larger control for the total heat transport. Whereas when you move to 34.5 south, the geostrophic has a larger control. So because of time, I'm not going into detail for this. Here is the separation into Overturning and gyre components for the internal variation. Similar to the seasonal variation, we see the dominance of Overturning component at all latitude, but the gyre component does increase as you move southward. This is links to the intensification of southward flowing Brazil current at the western boundary and the intensification of northward flowing Banguela current at the eastern boundary. And it also perhaps links to the grass leakage near the eastern boundary at 34.5 south for this large gyre component at that location. So, so here I'm showing you the lead-lag correlation in the South Atlantic between different pairs of meridian heat transport on internal timescale, just to look into the connectivity of heat transport. So the blue lines shows the correlation for the entire 29-year period. You can see that this is moving southward between 20, 25 south with 20, 25 south with 30, and this is the 3 latitude with 34.5 south. So except the 20 south with 34.5 south, and all other pairs we see a significant correlation. So when we, so you can, for the common period with energy budget between 2000 to 2013, we see a higher correlation, from this energy budget meridian heat transport. This is also true for our estimate during this time period. During this time period, you see higher correlation. And also interestingly, you can see this time lag. If you look at the blue line, and you see that the 34.5 cells leading the heat transport to its north, the leading time is about 3 to 9 months. Okay, so just quickly that we also use those meridian heat transport estimates to look into their role in ocean heat transport in South Atlantic. So the right panel here, the left panel here shows you the heat content from different products. Well, you see that from different data, you can see large variations in the heat content changes in South Atlantic between 20 and 35 cells. However, when you look at the period after 2004 or 2005, when there are more Argo data, all estimates kind of come together. All shows this the big decrease in ocean heat content. When we look into the forcing of ocean heat convergence versus ARC heat flux, shown on the top right panel here, you can see that the heat content change, as shown the right line, is dominated by the ocean heat convergence, the black line here, and the ARC heat flux plays a minimal role. And when we separate the transport into geostrophic and Eichmann component in the lower panel here, you see that the ocean heat convergence during this time period is mainly coming from the Eichmann transport. So when we look at the forcing, the lower panel here, shows you the sea level pressure during this cooling period. And you can see that in the South Atlantic, there is the positive sea level pressure anomaly, which induces this southward Eichmann transport, explaining this cooling. And we look at the relationship of Eichmann transport with Southern Angular mode and also the Pacific South American mode, particularly the mode 2, which links to the Central Pacific warming, which forces this wave train propagate southward and eastward into the South Atlantic. So this lower left panel here is the sea level pressure anomaly corresponding to the PSA2 pattern. So you see this high pressure anomaly consistent with what we see the sea level pressure anomaly during this cooling period. This is suggesting that PSA2 pattern kind of the main force for this cooling. But this is not true for the entire this time period. When we look at the correlations among the three index with Eichmann transport, the correlation is not significant, but only during this specific time period. So I think that's all I have for today. Here is just a sample for the conclusion. Because of time, I'm not going to repeat here. If you have questions, I'm happy to address. Thank you all.
Great talk. Some questions I think we can see from the chat. From Gustavo, hold on a second, lots of questions. Well, first from Rick. So he wonder how that convergence compares to directly calculated ocean heat content change from the temperature profiles. Well, Rick, you can directly ask Shenfu.
Yeah, thanks. took me a second to figure out how to unmute. So yeah, Sanki had noted that you have a negative trend at 26.5 and a positive trend at 34.5, suggesting oceanic heat accumulation. And it would be interesting, I think, to look at maybe the estimates of ocean heat content from Argo and whatever else you have at kind of two ends of this long-term time series to see if it is approximately consistent with that. I don't know if you've done that or not, but it might be an interesting thing to look at if not.
So I actually tried, but you see the increasing trend, but then I haven't looked at the air-sea fluxes, and I only look at the trend itself, but not really the magnitude. I have to look at the magnitude whether that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. No, I understand you would have to take the air-sea flux into consideration as well. Thanks, Shenfu.
Okay.
Okay, from Evanis Peter, on the methodology section, did you compare the temperature section in 2025 South with AX97 XBT data?
Yeah, this is the comparison. Sorry, I didn't catch the question. Is that whether we compared the SBT section with what we derived from our altimeter?
Yeah, did you compare the temperature section in 20 and 25 South with the XBT section 97? I'm not sure.
We don't have transbasin section across 20 South, 25 South, and 30 South. We only have either AX7 as AX18, as I shown here. Yes, we did compare with AX18 as well. This is showed in our 2015 paper, where is our first one to publish for the methodology.
From Hyun-suk.
I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, from Hyun-suk, have you compared the result with encoder?
I have, let me see, I think I do have something at the end. I did compare a number of different estimates, but I don't have time series here, but I can show you the correlation. So here I did, I think it's early this year or last year, I forgot, when I gave a talk for our GFDL and LNL workshop. So this is I did correlation among different estimates, as you can see here, the different pair. So what you see that at 26.5 north, most, all those estimates compare pretty well. But then as you move in southward, the comparisons are just not that good. So this is something we need look into it, whether this is due to their less data in Southern Ocean, in the South Atlantic, to constrain the models and to derive, the statistical relationships, which need further study. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Gustavo has a question. Please, Gustavo.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Hello, Shenfu. As I understand from participating in some of this work, your methodology for when you, sorry, that was thunder. Your methodology when you compute overturning circulation and heat transport from altimetry and for Argo are very similar, but not when you have data from moorings both in the north and in the south. How much do you think that those differences that you see in the seasonal cycle and then year-to-year variability maybe because of sampling and because of method, and then also because of methodology on how you compute both the heat transport and the overturning circulation?
From what I'm looking at the dynamic height here, you look at the signal cycle. I think that's maybe mainly because of the difference in what we observe. And you can see that the difference is mainly coming from interior, as we're forcing the Eichmann transport and the Fourier current transport are kind of very similar. And this you can see that the transport are corresponding pretty well to the dynamic height difference at the two boundaries. And then when you look at dynamic height from Meridians and SSH, they do not compare well. Meridian doesn't show much of variation, from January to September. It's kind of surprising. I would think that the altimeter should, get good observational signal cycle for the sea level. I also computed the signal cycle from Argo data. I think they are pretty show good comparison with altimeter data. So I think that maybe something related to how they derive the surface measurements is missing, where should be. I mean, this is where signal cycle is constrained, mostly in the top 100 or 200 meters, and perhaps also the interannual variation. So I think this is really need further investigation. Thank you for the question.
Shenfu. Thank you. And if you don't mind, sorry, Kandai, I'm sorry, Shenfu. I have an additional question. We have seen in the news around a month ago about one research work that showed a decrease in the meridional overturning in the North Atlantic. Is this the same type of value that you found and we have been observing from our estimates at AOML during the last many years?
Well, you can see here that we do see a decreasing trend at 26.5 mils. Well, for the 29-year period. But I think, as I mentioned during the talk, let me see the interannual. For the rapid array, so this decreasing, I think this is really largely attributed to this peak here around 2006. But we don't see this peak. And interestingly, during this time period, they have morning failures. They use climatology. So I don't know how much this contributes to this decrease. This is really, I don't know. I think maybe some people from Rapid group can explain this. But that's a really good question. I think it's something we need to look into.
Thank you, Shenfu.
Question from Renalis: is the decreased agreement between the comparisons in the South Atlantic possibly due to barotropic contribution to MOC variation?
Let me see, South Atlantic. This it's really interesting, South Atlantic. I think for the moorings, there are some part is due to we're missing the nearshore transport variability. So I have looked at the variability from altimeter derived estimate. If I just took the transport between the moorings, how much variability it is, and then look at the boundary, well, it's not included in the moorings. The transport, let me see, I think I have the variability here somewhere. Oh, sorry. And maybe let me see. Oh, I cannot move it. So, sorry. So I don't have it here, but I think near the boundaries, those transport missing from the moorings can explain about like 20% of the variability, but still not enough to really account for the disagreement. I think, I don't know, I think that's something we need to look into using all data we have. And also, you know, in the North Atlantic, this Florida current transport is really important, and most methodologies use it to constrain the transport over there. That also increases the comparison.
Yeah, Shenfu, thank you. That's what I put in my parentheses in the comment, that maybe some of the better agreement at 26 North is because of the Florida Straits, and we don't have that inshore representation of the flow on the western boundary.
Yeah, also,
35
also I think I want to take a look at the you know, the dynamic height from the moorings and then from and the SSH at this two boundary in along 34.5 south. Just what similar as what we did for the 26.5 north to see how they compare. Maybe we can get some you know, understanding from there. Thank you for the question.
Okay, I think we should stop here. We're a little bit over time, but thanks everyone. Thank you, Shenfu. Thank you everyone for attending the seminar, and then perhaps see you again. Well, we can talk offline and then see you again in our next edition of this seminar. Thanks.
Thank you all for attending the seminar.